The flashing red and blue lights painted my front porch like a cheap movie set, right there on a quiet Saturday morning. Two police cruisers, not one, but two, blocked my driveway, my private driveway. And right smack in the middle of it all stood Veronica Hayes, the self-proclaimed queen of the Sunset Valley Homeowners Alliance, waving her arms like she was trying to land a plane. "Officer, that's him. He threatened me," she screamed, pointing her perfectly polished finger straight at me as if I were some kind of escaped convict. I stood there, 72 years old, in my favorite flannel shirt, a wrench still in my hand from fixing a stubborn bolt on my mailbox, genuinely wondering how telling a neighbor not to park her ridiculous pearl-white Mercedes on my property turned into this absolute circus. But in Veronica's world, the rules, and definitely the law, didn't apply to Veronica. So here I was, facing two county deputies, a hysterical HOA president, and a very real chance of being arrested on the land I'd paid for with 40 years of honest engineering work. Before I tell you how this whole thing went sideways, and how I ended up giving her a masterclass in property law, hit that like button and tell me where you're watching from, because you are absolutely not going to want to miss the final scene of this suburban drama. Before Veronica Hayes ever clicked her way onto our street, life in Sunset Valley was exactly what I'd hoped for. Predictable, peaceful, comfortable in that slightly boring way you only appreciate when you're retired. I'd been here for 30 years, long enough to see the saplings I planted grow into massive shade trees and the neighborhood kids turn into mortgage-paying adults. I retired at 65, fixed up the place myself, and figured I'd spend the rest of my years tinkering in my woodshop, tending to my old azaleas, and enjoying the view from my porch swing with a strong black coffee. The neighborhood wasn't flashy, but it had character. We had those terrible but beloved 4th of July block parties, and everybody knew the basic rule: leave each other alone, and definitely don't park in front of the fire hydrant. The HOA back then was a joke, a dusty committee that only met to decide the date of the annual Easter egg hunt. Nobody cared about fines, and nobody cared who parked where. My house sits at the very end of our cul-de-sac, and my driveway, well, my driveway is different. It's long, curving, lined with those beautiful old maples my late wife, Eleanor, and I planted together. We bought the house with a clear easement deed, which means the driveway is mine, fully, legally. It's not shared access, not a common area, it's private property. I'd even put up a sturdy, simple wooden sign years ago: private drive. No parking, not because I'm a grump, but to keep delivery trucks from blocking my shop access. For 3 decades, nobody, not a single person, ever questioned it. My neighbors, Stan, the retired contractor, Maria, who ran the local florist, Chris, the quiet accountant, they knew. Stan once joked, "Patrick, your driveway's so long, you could charge tolls." We all laughed. It was just the rhythm of life here. Then, one scorching summer afternoon, a massive moving truck pulled up across the street. Out stepped Veronica Hayes, high heels clicking like castanets, sunglasses huge enough to hide half her face, and an expression that screamed, "The new management has arrived." I remember nodding a polite hello from the porch. She didn't nod back. Instead, she just stood there, surveying the street like a general inspecting conquered territory. Within a week, she'd introduced herself to everyone, though announced her candidacy is probably more accurate. "I'm Veronica Hayes. I'm a business consultant, and I will be running for the Alliance board this fall," was her opening line. Within a month, she was acting president, simply because the old guy moved out suddenly and nobody cared enough to stop her from volunteering. Oh, but Veronica cared. Too much. The first sign of real trouble was a neon yellow flyer taped to my mailbox. Notice: Alliance is reviewing aesthetic compliance standards to ensure visual superiority. Then came the emails. One about trash can visibility, one about unauthorized garden gnomes, Maria's whole collection, and another about Stan's perfectly fine picket fence needing to be painted an approved shade of taupe. She turned a friendly neighborhood into a tense, surveillance-heavy corporation. I kept my head down. My property was immaculate. My fence was within code. My grass was trimmed. What could she possibly find wrong with me? Well, Veronica didn't need a reason. She just needed a target who wasn't afraid of her. It started innocently enough. She came by while I was watering the azaleas. "Morning, Mr. O'Connell," she chirped, that smile tight, fake. "You know, your driveway looks so exclusive." We're trying to promote a more inviting community atmosphere. Have you considered removing that private drive sign? I looked up. No, Veronica, I haven't. It keeps confusion down. Besides, that sign's been here since '95. Her lips tightened into a thin line. Well, it looks unwelcoming. We're an alliance, after all. I shrugged. Alliance or not, that concrete patch is on my deed. Folks are welcome to wave when they drive by, but they can't park on it. She forced a sharp, brittle laugh, the kind people make when they're already plotting revenge. A few days later, I caught her Mercedes parked halfway up my driveway, engine running, door open, while she was loudly conducting a business call on her headset. I walked out calmly and tapped on the window. Hey, Veronica, you're blocking my access. She lowered her massive sunglasses, gave me that smug little grin. Oh, relax, Patrick. It's just for a second. I'm finalizing a big contract with a client. I pointed directly at the sign. Second or not, this isn't Alliance property. She muttered something about territorial old men and peeled out, gravel spitting behind her tires. That's when I knew. This wasn't about convenience. It was about absolute control. My sign was a direct challenge to her self-appointed authority. Over the next few weeks, she escalated. I started receiving absurd violation letters. My mailbox post was the wrong shade of dark walnut. My fence was too rustic, and my azaleas were non-conforming shrubbery. Every time I walked outside, I felt her eyes watching from across the street, her curtains twitching, her phone camera likely flashing. Maria joked, "She has more surveillance footage of your yard than the Pentagon." I laughed, but the constant pressure was starting to weigh on me. Then came the final push. Veronica unilaterally announced a new, temporary community parking policy at the next board meeting, claiming residents could use any open driveway during community events or overflow periods. I raised my hand. You can't just give people permission to park on private property, Veronica. That's called trespassing. She smiled her politician's smile. Oh, Patrick, everyone here is part of Sunset Valley. Don't you think it's a little selfish to hoard space? The room went silent. Nobody wanted to challenge her. You call it hoarding, I stated, my voice low. I call it ownership. Her smile evaporated. We'll see about that. From that day forward, I knew she was coming for me. And she didn't wait long. 2 Saturdays later, I woke up to find 3 large SUVs parked across my driveway, completely blocking my garage and even my mailbox. Right in the middle, perfectly centered like a prize, was Veronica's pearl-white Mercedes. I stood there, barefoot, coffee mug in hand, the steam rising as my blood pressure spiked. Across the street, Veronica and 2 women I didn't recognize were laughing, clipboards in hand, snapping photos of my house. Veronica, what is this? I called out. She turned, flashing her best fake smile. Morning, Patrick. Just conducting the Alliance's spring compliance check. Overflow parking is allowed today under the new temporary community policy. I walked onto the driveway, placing my mug carefully on the railing. On my driveway, she tilted her head, feigning innocence. The Alliance policy allows temporary use of common access areas. This space is accessible from the street, so technically, I cut her off. Technically, Veronica, that is my land. You can check the county deed if you need a refresher. The 2 women giggled nervously. Veronica waved them off. He's just being territorial. Move them now, I ordered, walking toward the cars. Excuse me? You wouldn't dare tow them, she spat. That would be a violation of the community cooperation standard. You just made that term up, didn't you? I asked, almost smiling. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened a saved PDF, my property deed, the Lot 17A easement, recorded 1995. I can, and I just did. The county says otherwise. That was the moment she snapped. She stomped toward me in her heels, her face flushed crimson. You are harassing me, Patrick O'Connell. You are making this neighborhood hostile. Hostile? I spread my arms wide. You're the one trespassing. The women wisely backed away. Oh, don't you worry, Veronica said, snatching her phone from her purse. I'm calling the board, and if you touch these cars, I'll call the sheriff. Call whoever you want, I said, turning back toward my house. I'll be waiting in the AC. I gave her an hour of her frantic whispering and pacing. Then, I called the Oak Haven County Sheriff's Office. I calmly explained. Trespassers on private property, multiple warnings given, refusal to move. The dispatcher promised to send a deputy. When I stepped outside, Veronica was now filming herself in front of my truck, narrating dramatically into her camera. This is what intimidation looks like. A man trying to bully a woman for simply doing her duty for the community. Veronica, you're 2 feet from my petunias, not a war zone, I muttered. That's when I saw Stan, my neighbor, walking up the street. He stopped, gave me a look that said, "Here we go," and called out, "Morning, Veronica. Valet service now." Veronica's voice turned shrill. "This doesn't concern you, Stan." "It does," he chuckled. "That driveway's private. Been that way since '95. He turned to me. "Need me to call my tow buddy?" "Don't you dare," she shrieked. "Touch my car, and I'll have both of you arrested." By the time Deputy Miller arrived, a calm, tall man in mirrored sunglasses, Veronica was already mid-rant. "Yes, thank you, officer. This man is threatening me for using a public driveway." I raised a hand. "Officer, I asked them to move their cars from my private property." Miller looked at the printouts of my deed. "Looks pretty clear, ma'am. This driveway is his. The Alliance doesn't override county property lines. If you're parked here without permission, you're trespassing." Veronica's face was a masterpiece of disbelief and fury. "I'll file a complaint. You'll hear from my lawyer." Miller sighed. "Ma'am, you can file whatever you want. But you're moving those cars right now." She stomped to her Mercedes, muttering curses, and the 2 other SUVs scrambled out. As she drove off, she paused just long enough to glare through her tinted window. "This isn't over, Patrick." "Didn't think it was," I smiled. "I thought maybe that would be the end of it." But Veronica Hayes wasn't the backing off type. That evening, I found a letter in my mailbox. Notice of community disruption. Signed President Veronica Hayes. I laughed. Legal escalation from the woman who'd just been warned by a deputy. But something in my gut told me this was just the warm-up act. 2 Saturdays later, the whole neighborhood was thrown into this Sunset Valley Unity Festival. A blatant excuse for Veronica to stage a public spectacle. I woke up to find balloons, folding tables, and Veronica in a blinding coral blazer, barking orders. I watched from the porch as cars started rolling in, parking everywhere. Then, my stomach dropped. 3 cars turned down my private driveway again. I waved my arms, but they kept inching forward, blocking my garage. I stomped down the steps. "You folks can't park here." The first driver rolled down his window. "Veronica said we could. Said it's community overflow." "Veronica is wrong again. Move the cars before I have them towed." He backed out, but the other 2 stayed. And then, right on cue, Veronica appeared, clipboard in hand, smirk firmly in place. "Patrick, why are you yelling at my guests?" "Because your guests are trespassing. Move the cars." "Oh, Patrick, you're always so defensive. This is a community event. Everyone's allowed to use common access points. This isn't a common anything." I said through clenched teeth. "This is my driveway." "Are you sure?" she mocked. "From where I'm standing, it looks connected to the main road. And anything connected to the main road falls under Alliance visibility and access." "Visibility, yes. Access, no." She waved a dismissive hand. "Maybe I'll just let the board decide that." She turned toward the gathering crowd. "Enjoy the event, everyone. Don't mind the noise from the grumpy old men who don't understand community spirit." The laughter that followed stung, but I wasn't backing down. I walked over to her car, crouched down, and pretended to check her air pressure, holding up my phone. "Documentation, Veronica. Trespassing, unauthorized parking, potential property damage. You know, legal stuff." Her face turned crimson. "You're harassing me again." "That's it. I'm calling the police." I shrugged. "Go ahead. I'll wait right here." 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars arrived. Deputy Miller sighed the moment he saw me. "Mr. O'Connell, we meet again." Veronica ran towards them, mid-rant. "Officer, this man is threatening me, photographing my vehicle, and obstructing a public event." Miller's partner, Officer Reed, handed Miller my deed folder. Miller skimmed it, then turned to Veronica. "Ma'am, this property is privately owned. The Alliance can't override that without consent. That's not fair. He's trying to make me look bad in front of everyone." "Ma'am," Reed said calmly, "you're doing that yourself." Then came the moment of absolute madness. Veronica completely lost it. She kicked her own car door, a loud, metallic thud, and pointed at me, wild-eyed. "He did it. He just damaged my car. He grabbed me. He's violent." The crowd gasped. I stared, speechless. Are you out of your mind? Miller sighed. That's enough. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and filing a false police report. The neighborhood fell silent, then erupted in whispers. They led Veronica to the squad car, still screaming about false charges and power abuse, her coral blazer gleaming as she was firmly guided into the back seat. The next day, my attorney, Sarah Whitman, called. Patrick, you've become famous. Local news ran the segment. HOA president detained after dispute with retired engineer. And get this, Veronica's lawyer, some clown named David Bolton, just filed a harassment complaint against you. Physically obstructed? I laughed. The only thing I obstructed was her car door with her own foot. I knew she wasn't fighting for justice. She was fighting for control. Losing face in front of her neighbors was a wound she couldn't tolerate. A week later, a certified letter arrived. Notice of intent to sue from the Alliance, demanding I remove my unwelcoming signage and seeking civil damages for defamation and obstruction. They're really throwing spaghetti at the wall here, Sarah muttered when I showed her the papers. I just laughed. Unauthorized signage. They mean my no parking sign. But I followed Sarah's advice. Stay calm, document everything, and let the paperwork do the fighting. At the next Alliance meeting, the air was electric. Veronica, seated beside her lawyer, attempted to regain control, calling the video misinformation. I raised my hand. You mean the video where you got arrested for trespassing? Gasps rippled through the room. Then, pure cinematic justice struck. From the back of the room, someone projected the video onto the wall. Veronica screaming, kicking her car, being led away in handcuffs. Silence, then a massive wave of laughter. Veronica spun around, horrified. Turn that off. That's an illegal recording. Her lawyer's face went pale. Miss Hayes, perhaps we should. But Veronica was already storming out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the ceiling. The board immediately voted 5-1 to suspend Veronica pending review. For a few blessed days, the tension lifted. But Veronica didn't retreat. She plotted. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, Sarah received a formal lawsuit notice. Defamation of character, harassment, and property interference for my unauthorized signage, negatively affecting community value. I knew she was aiming to bleed me dry with legal fees. They build their identity around power, Patrick, Sarah explained. When you take that away, they crumble. The case finally hit the courtroom. In his opening, Bolton gave a theatrical speech about toxic masculinity in suburban power structures. Sarah simply presented my deed in the video. The court clerk loaded it up, and for the third time, Veronica's meltdown played on a big screen. The judge paused the video halfway through. Miss Hayes, he said dryly, is there any part of this where you don't appear to be breaking the law? Laughter filled the gallery. The verdict was swift. The court finds the plaintiff's claims to be without merit. The judge ordered Veronica to pay my legal fees and damages for property interference. Ma'am, he advised, I suggest you spend less time managing your neighbors' lives and more time managing your own. Gavel bang. Case closed. Veronica stormed out, defeated. 2 days later, 2 board members knocked on my door. Patrick, Richard Thompson said sheepishly. We wanted to apologize. We didn't know the whole story. We're holding an emergency vote to remove Veronica permanently. We'd actually like you to consider serving as an advisor. I nearly dropped my coffee. You want me to advise the HOA? He shrugged. You know the rules better than anyone now. Over the next few weeks, the final pieces fell into place. The HOA treasurer revealed Veronica had been using Alliance funds to pay for personal landscaping and dry cleaning. Nearly $8,000 gone. The board voted to remove her permanently. And a few days later, a small envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside, a folded sheet of paper. You win. I'm leaving Sunset Valley. But remember, every HOA needs a villain. Maybe someday that'll be you. VH. I took the job as resident consultant. Once a month, I sit in the meeting, answer questions, and remind them that rules are supposed to protect people, not punish them. The new board is fair, transparent, and respectful. That night, I stood in my driveway, the air quiet and cool. I took out a can of dark paint and brushed a fresh coat over the old wooden sign. Private drive, no parking. It wasn't about keeping people out anymore. It was about boundaries, the kind that make peace possible. Ownership doesn't just mean having a deed. It means responsibility and the patience to defend it. If you've ever had your own HOA nightmare or a Karen who tried to boss you around, I want to hear your story. What was the most satisfying moment of justice in your own boundary war? Drop it in the comments below. Let's see how many of us have fought the good fight for a little peace and sanity. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because trust me, around here, the drama never really ends.